So good morning, everyone. I'm Dharmash Mistry. I'm one of the partners at Lakestar, and I'm delighted today to introduce Peter Smith, CEO and co-founder of Blockchain. Blockchain is one of our portfolio companies following a very early this year $40 million fundraise led by Lakestar, followed by Google Ventures, Lightspeed, and many others. Peter is the co-founder as well as the CEO. Blockchain is one of the world's leading software platforms for digital assets, with over 18 million wallets and 100 million plus transactions. Peter will talk a lot more about that. But beyond his day job, yes, Peter is a thought leader in the space and a World Economic Forum technology pioneer, or whatever that means. But he is, very interestingly, an avid walker, surfer, skier, climber, and all-round action man. And he recently told me at one of the board meetings that he has run so far this year over 700 miles. So that's London to Edinburgh 4 times, or roughly 20 miles per week. So this man is a little bit crazy. So please welcome Peter. So Peter, let's talk. The market is super hot. Yesterday, the price of Bitcoin hit over $7,000, sorry. The market cap of crypto is 150 billion. Which is more than Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley's market cap put together. Before we talk about this super hot market, tell us a little bit more about blockchain and talk a little bit about this phenomenal growth of the company you're building.
Yeah, so appreciate it. It's great to be here this morning. And Dharmash promised that he would introduce me with some, the professional stuff and then some embarrassing antidote. And I think maybe what is embarrassing about that is that I've only run 700 miles this year, which is kind of a low year, and I directly blame that on the company. This year in crypto has been the craziest year in crypto yet. And as you know, we went from in the last year, market cap of 10 or so billion to 15 or so, 150 or so billion, which has obviously been a crazy ride. We do a few things as a company. The first is we provide a data and analytics platform. We provide a development platform, and then we're probably most well known for providing a digital wallet. It's by far the largest digital wallet in cryptocurrency. Now about 19 million people have chosen us to be their sort of passport to the digital currency, digital asset ecosystem. And out of that product, we have millions and millions of active users on a monthly basis. And then on top of that, we do about the same amount of volume as PayPal's consumer product. Actually, just slightly more than them now. Which is pretty crazy and one of the more interesting things to happen. So over the next 12 months, we'll probably do somewhere between 70 and 80 billion in consumer volume. That is up from just a few months ago where we were doing, our volume was sort of measured in the low 1 billion mark on a monthly basis. So the growth has obviously been quite intense. Both the industries and our own, which usually outpaces the industries by a multiple or two. I think the most challenging thing in our space right now, both for our company and for most companies across the space, is keeping up on a infrastructure level. So when your traffic and requests are hitting the platform really hard, and it's also very spiky, there's quite a lot of challenges that go into making sure that you're extending the same level of quality of service to your customers today as you were to your customers even a week or two ago. So I think that's been a pretty big challenge.
So super phenomenal. So similar kinds of volumes to PayPal, which is an unbelievable achievement. Let's keep talking a little bit, and I'm sure the audience are interested a little bit more broadly around the market. So where do you think crypto, in terms of currency, is going in the kind of short to medium term?
So I think in the short term, we're likely to see a significant market correction sometime in the next 6 to 12 months. I'm an economist by background, and one of the things that's very true is when you have markets that are highly volatile, they usually come back down as well. And so I think that similarly to how we've seen other corrections in the past, we'll see a correction. We'll see a whole slew of Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever they intend to focus on in the press is dead stories, but the correction price will be significantly higher than the price that the run-up started at. And people ask me where is it? And I have no idea, and I have no idea when the correction will come. So I have no view on those things. I just know that they're sort of inevitable. But I think what will happen in the really long term is that you're going to see more and more of these assets. So at 150 billion, we're at about 1.2% of the global market cap for, or global market share for financial services, which is around a $13 trillion market. And that means that there's still quite a lot of room to grow. Even when you stack our industry up against something like gold, which has a market cap that's far in excess of ours, we're still single-digit percentage of the gold market cap. And so there's a really long way to go. And I think one of the other things to keep in mind is that the traditional financial system has only really succeeded in making about 8 to 9% of the world's assets liquid, whereas our space is trying to take the remaining sort of 80-something% of assets that aren't liquid and make those liquid. And so if you think about it in terms of not just where the market is today, but how big financial services will be over a 20-year horizon, I think there's a really long way to go.
And can you talk a little bit about the very hot and controversial topic of ICOs? So are people like me going to be made redundant?
I don't think venture capitalists or finance people will be made redundant. I think there will be less of them. There'll either be less of them or there'll be less of them as a ratio to how big the market is. So when I say that like only 8% of assets in the world have been financialized, that's when you think about equities or bonds, right? But most assets in the world today are not liquid and tradable. Like your house is actually not very liquid and tradable. Your intellectual property as an individual is not very tradable. Even sort of like shares in a ride-sharing fleet are currently not liquid or tradable. What we're going to see happen over the next 10 to 15 years is all of these things are going to become liquid and tradable. A big part of that is what we now call ICOs, these initial coin offerings. I prefer to think of them as initial asset offerings. So, there's usually a token or coin, but what's true about all of these is they're secured by some cryptographic ledger, whether it's on their own native ledger, like with Ethereum or Bitcoin, or whether it's a ledger that they're, sort of graphed onto, like the ERC20 tokens on Ethereum. They're on some cryptographic ledger, and what this does is it makes it really cheap to put these assets out. You can now put assets out and raise money, on an IPO level with, a team of 5 or 6 people and, no bankers.
Okay, and in the last few minutes, let's move beyond assets and currencies towards the underlying blockchain technology. Talk a little bit about that in terms of where do you see that being applied and used in the short and medium term?
Yeah, so I think the underlying technology is really good for any environment where you have a lot of participants in the ecosystem, but very low levels of trust. So I'm actually not very bullish on taking the technology and applying it towards large incumbents, like banks or financial institutions. There's a lot of political reasons within those organizations, and I think after 3.5, 4 years of seeing people work on this problem, we've seen relatively little adoption, particularly in comparison to the segment of the market which is much more consumer focused, where we've seen a huge amount of adoption and huge levels of growth. I could be wrong about that in the long term, but I think for me, I'm really interested in building to where the future is going to be in 10 or 15 years. And when you think about where the world's going in 10 to 15 years, most things migrate towards large, public, open protocols and systems when technology comes in and disrupts them.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Cheers.